Hi there, everybody. This is me again, Patricia Windrow at the Cable Easel, with a program for painting and drawing from life. This is going to be part 2 of a study which was started before, which was part 1, obviously, of the Captree Boat Basin here on Long Island within our viewing area of a really wonderful spot. And the technique, of course, by anybody who has watched the show for a while understands that we shoot a scene with some videotape and come back and project it into in the studio onto a video screen, which you are also capable of doing if you have a camcorder, and that you can go out and shoot your scenes, bring it back and project it on your television screen and paint such as I do from this particular vantage point. It's the closest that you can get to painting out of doors without getting out of doors. It is a novel and unique approach. I do believe that it is unique to this program. I think that we invented it. If it's seen anywhere else, it's been copied. So much for that amount of bragging. Here we have the composition 3/4 of the way through, or at least I hope almost 3/4 of the way through. The foreground can make or break a picture. This part in here, even though it looks as though it could be comparatively simple, has got to be comprehensible to the viewer and also to the painter to understand what it is that makes this strange and mysterious shape what it is. It's a landmass, but it is not a usual one. It isn't just a beach running down to the water. Something has happened here. A mudflat has accumulated. Sand and water and green stuff is growing on it. And that's one of the reasons that I chose this scene, because it is such a sort of an oddball thing to look at. I'm working with turpentine in a glass, very carefully labeled. Don't use for drinking. This is a turpentine container. I think that that's a very wise thing to tell people to do, to label all of these things that have a possibility of being dangerous in a household, and it's not difficult to forewarn people about what is in what and where it is and how it should be treated. Here I'm working from backwards to forward, and I'm working on this very strange kind of an arrangement back here with all sorts of very knobby and dark-looking objects, which are projecting against the sky and against the water, with which is not the kind of thing that you would be able to invent. You'd have to observe it. These are spiky things, pieces that have been washed up onto the shore from water and tides and so on, and it could be a mixture of just about anything. In order to do this, you have to observe. We have took a few close-ups of it, and there you have an idea of possibly how these shapeless things have got to be very closely looked at and understood, that if you don't make them the way if you don't make them comprehensible, people are going to ask the dreaded question, what is that supposed to be? Now, that is what every painter in the world tries to avoid, that anybody would ask the question, because if you've gone and painted it and it isn't comprehensible, you can bet your dollar that somebody's going to say, what is that supposed to be? So, as I say, observing is the key to this kind of painting, and I'm going to, there was a seagull that just went by, and we're going to try and maybe freeze that a little bit later to get the genuine, real taste of what it's like to be out there with these things happening. Boats passing by, waves lapping up onto the shore, and seagulls, of course, flying overhead. As I'm going to progress along here, I'm going to introduce the color of the sand. The sand is, it's interesting. Everybody thinks that sand is yellow or white, but it actually turns out to be sort of ochre and pink in tone, but also very pale. So sand is sort of a real nuisance to try and figure out to do. I'm mixing majority of it is white, of course, some yellow ochre, touch of spectrum red. I'll see whether or not that works. I may have to subdue it with something, but let me just put it on here and see if it makes if it's believable. Well, I suppose it could be a little bit paler and maybe a touch more lemon yellow to see if I can really get the color of sand. But when the sun is bright on sand, it tends to be really almost colorless. But of course it isn't. This nice diagonal, which I talked about in the first program, which is what gives you the perspective and the sense of distance on this composition, is the fact that it is in fact a diagonal, leading the eye right into the picture. Sand changes color, of course, when it gets wet, and even that is inexplicable unless the light is of a certain time of day. So once again, to just at the risk of repeating myself tiresomely, to keep repeating the same thing is, do not think that you can sit down and just willy-nilly pull a composition out of your memory. It simply does not work. If you go out and you do sketches and can refer to your sketches, that's good. If you can't, you have the ability to go out with your camcorder. Now that maybe is unfair to people that don't have one, but I think that eventually just about everybody is going to have one of those things in their possession. I know that it's took a while for my family to get one, but my sons have a camcorder and they take it everywhere. And it's a lovely documentation for all sorts of events, but it also can help you with this kind of introduction to painting from life, namely to use it for this particular advantage. Now, coming out of here, which is the, I'm going to tell you about the combination of colors. This is sap green and burnt sienna to get this wonderful rich tone here. You may want to simply make a notation of that in your memory book, that when you're out there, how did she get that color? It's quite easy to remember that it is this sap green and burnt sienna, colors that I rely on almost all the time. The shadow, for some reason or another, at least it says so on this monitor, underneath that bush to the right appears to have some blue in it. So instead of questioning how is it possible to have some blue, it's sort of got a little bit of a mauve tone, I'm going to put it right in with blue and see if it works. It's possible that at this time of day that there was a blue shadow cast on the beach. It has happened before. I did it in the other study that I did of the Captree Bridge. There were blue shadows on the dunes being cast by the pine trees, and it certainly was a nice color scheme. Speaking of color schemes, the fact that we have a colorless sky up there is going to make this painting very easy to live with in anybody's viewing. The pale tones for landscapes, and I think that anybody who has observed American landscape painting, and I always recommend American landscape painting because those are the familiar scenes that we understand. The less colorful ones are the ones that seem to be so appealing and are far more classic. Color can be applied in floral painting as much as you want, but to keep the tones of landscape painting to a subtle range of colors. Now, as you can see, I am interpreting what has happened on this beach because this is not a biological study of the flotsam on the beach. This is an impression. It should be a believable impression, but it is nevertheless an impression of what is lying out there. These objects have got to be believable, but they can also be a little bit loose in their approach. That maybe sometime on my program when I have a live program, somebody can ask me about what I mean by loose. But I think that you can see the deliberate strokes which I'm using, trying to get the effect of that flotsam. Now, lying here on this sandy place, which I'm going to have to pull up here and get a little bit more of this pigment up here, is a complex piece of observation. The close-ups will tell us that there are all sorts of stringy things, and that has to be done very believably, and it can also be interpreted, but it has to be attended to. You change the brush, obviously, and you get a very thinned down paint, and you begin to try to give the feeling of what it is that's lying on the beach. It crisscrosses. It's a little bit spiky here and there. It changes in color for the most part. It's greens and dark colors and blues, but all of this is the anatomy of the beach. When it washes up on the shore, it seems to be a minor incident, but in a painter's observation, it is vital and absolutely important to be sure that you get the feeling of this stuff that is lying here on the beach. And I think you'll agree that were it not there, this would not be as believable as it is now that it is there. Well, so much for this. I can get back to it later. I want to get moving on the way this strange sort of shelf of well, whatever it may be called, it's probably called a mud flat, but I think it's unique in my viewing of the places here on Long Island, and it's one of the things that made me really, when Matt Garfine and I went out today to find this area, the look of this was so intriguing and so really peculiar that I thought, well, maybe I can pull this off, and maybe I can get people to believe what they're looking at. It is probably anywhere between 1.5 feet or more thick, and it juts out into the water in these rather lovely shapes, and they're sort of covered with nice mysterious looking growths and things. I'm going to do the water first here along here, which means that I'm going to take probably a clean brush to get the blending. Well, I'll do this one, and be sure to always have a lot of paper towels or rags with you to clean your brushes, because as you can see, you're dealing from dark colors to light colors, and they tend to get terribly mixed up and makes for a messy and muddy painting and tremendous frustration. Well, the water, as it comes closer to you in this thing by observation, you can see has become progressively darker until it becomes transparent towards the shore, and then you see the sand through it, which of course is another one of those inexplicable things, but which is what makes painting the challenge that it is. So the water has become rather dark here. Maybe there's a dip in the bottom, and maybe there is all sorts of other elements that is making it appear to be darker than the other places. This bank here, of course, is casting a shadow in the water, which is probably one of the reasons that it's dark, but it's also shadows in the bottom, on the bottom part of this water. And as I come around here to the area, the water is now going to become, well, it's going to become sandy colored. So I'm going to abandon the blue, and I'm going to mix up some ochre and a touch of the sienna, and I'm going to see whether or not I can pull that off, see whether or not I can make you believe that this water is washing up on a sandy shore. It's not easy. It's probably going to have to be reworked a number of times, but problems can only be solved when you face them head on. I see also that there's an awful lot of mauve and purple in this sandy area here, probably because it's also wet. Sand changes color when it's wet, and with observation you'll see that it is virtually unbelievable just how dark it becomes, because, as I say, the sand up on the shoreline is pale, creamy apricot color, and then when it gets down into shadows, it becomes extremely dark. So let's see if I can blend this water here that is coming toward us and show you that the smoother the blend, the more watery it's going to become. The need to be faithful to the texture is what makes me what they call a realist. If you interpret this with great slashes of color and don't care about the blend, it would not come under the heading of realistic painting. So the blending is the point, that all of this has got to be very subtly and very carefully done. I would do it far more carefully were I working out there by myself with many, many, many hours to work at it, but I'm trying to condense this. This is very much like a synopsis of something. When I'm working here, I must work with great speed, and I also have to eliminate an awful lot of things that are happening. So, oh dear, that's the wrong tone. I wanted to get a little bit more sienna in there. So, down here by the shore, is an area which is going to be a little bit tricky to do, but I'm going to take a break for just a moment. I need to clean one of my brushes, and I also need to think about it. So I'll be right back. Back again to try to conclude and finalize this study of the Captree Boat Basin here on the south shore of Long Island. And we've progressed fairly well, and here let me talk a little bit about this great strange looking mud flat that has been produced through circumstances which I am not well versed enough to talk about because I'm not a marine biologist, but it is built up into a rather interesting form here, which gathers all sorts of living creatures and all sorts of wonderful reflections from the water, as well as algae and whatever other flotsam and jetsam happens to be finding its way in over the Great South Bay during this season, which of course is one of the more wonderful seasons of the year here in the eastern and south shore of Long Island. I have recently been familiar with the mountains of Virginia, and they of course are very interesting and very exciting, but there's something rather hypnotizing about the water here on Long Island. I'm sure that everybody agrees with that. They were out in droves today enjoying this particular extraordinary place that we live in. Some people are liable to say, well, with the amount of taxes we pay, we'd better get something pretty good, and I suppose that's valid as well. Now, I have tried to sketch in the lower part of this. It's going to blend and so on. However, when the water becomes turbulent, the need to introduce some waves is going to come, and let me see if I can probably show you that having put a shadow in here, right down here, there's a shadow. I'm going to give give that wave a crown. I'm going to give it a little bit of a head, so that the shadow has got some sense that something made that. But also it begins to lap up on the shore here, and it's a very lacy kind of wonderful looking thing, and all I can do is to hope that the pattern that I choose is going to be comprehensible, that it does in fact look like the wave that comes in and manages to lap up against the shore. I'm using pure white, of course, and I'm barely touching the canvas with it, and I'm trying to painting water is one of the most difficult and probably one of the most foolish things that one could attempt to do, but you can't help but want to, because we are a water planet and we are totally mesmerized by it, and therefore we want to try to isolate it. So with that kind of a general interpretive thing, let's see if when we step back a little bit later, see if it really has worked well. I'm trying to climb up onto this bank with my colors and see if I can get some feeling about what happens up here. This is, of course, all in the shadow side, and the bank becomes paler as it rises. As I said, either in this show or in the other one, this mud bank is probably 1.5 feet or more thick. And it's populated with growths and little creatures. I did see a few, well, some sort of sand fleas. They looked like little sand fleas when I was observing them today. And all of these things are make for what I consider a really very interesting scene that has to be properly documented, otherwise it will not be it won't be believed, nor will it be comprehended. So you have a task when you're doing something like this to try to take something which is unusual and have it self-explanatory visually, instead of having been taken on a guided tour and say, well, this is so and so and so and so. Now, along here there is a rather nice band of something separating the top of this mud flat from the sand, and all it is, I think, is just a sort of an indistinct line, either of stuff that has washed up onto the beach and has simply gathered there in a sort of a little, well, actually a necklace. It looks almost a little bit like a necklace. And here we come to the more difficult phase of the top of this mud flat, which means that I'm going to try to put the background on before I palette knife on the water accumulation on top here. So you bear with me for just a moment while I quickly put in, I need a little bit more blue, quickly put in the background for this, and I'm hoping that all of this will be comprehensible in just a moment to you. These are the things that painters do, and then when a crowd gathers around you, you feel as though you have to explain what you're doing, but it's a little bit difficult to explain what you're doing. I'm preparing the background of this area on the top here, but the water has come up and made tremendous reflections. So I think I'm going to use my palette knife now, mix up some color, which is going to be quite pale, almost as pale as the sky, and I'm going to lay it on here rather thick, because we are dealing with reflections. And let me see if I can make this, the accidentals is what I'm after for this area on the top of the mud flat. Sometimes it may and sometimes it may not work. If it doesn't, you will have to forgive me. These are the pitfalls of working live and letting people see it all hang out, as it were. The palette knife does things, if you manage to apply the paint lightly enough across the surface, it will do the little accidentals that I'm after for this, and I may just go and revise this a little bit, but for the most part this is what I think I'm after, that the water has climbed up onto here and rested on this mud flat and made this lovely sort of well, a very strange and wonderful looking bunch of reflections of whatever it is that's up here on this flat. And here's another little group here. Well, when we were out there today, let's see if any of this works, and if I need to add some brilliant color. There were birds. There were, in fact, some gulls that didn't care at all that we were there invading their property, and they sort of stood on the beach and faced the water and preened and were really exactly what seagulls are supposed to be, very picturesque and very cooperative. So I believe that we did get a few, yes, we got a few shots of them as they were doing that, and I think that maybe because the program seems to go so quickly, and unfortunately it moves much too fast for my taste. Let's see if I can get some of those birds in here. They have very distinctive heads, and the sun was making their white feathers even whiter than normal. And then they have a rather wonderful black arrangement on their backs. But for the most part, the beaks are dark, and they are just very distinctive because they're quite long and they are slightly hooked. So if you can, in fact, very subtly get these things to look like what they look like, they are there with their, and I'm using phthalo blue and some burnt sienna to do the dark. Well, that's not enough sienna to do the dark of their wings. I don't know the names of these gulls. The gulls with the big black wings, they are probably some kind of a migratory gull that I have not seen here on Long Island. They are not, they're not what you call, oh, what are they called? I wish I were a little bit more able to come up with their names. The herring gull is what we usually see on the island here, but this is, I don't believe that this is a herring gull. I think this is a migratory gull of some sort. Somebody is doubtlessly going to maybe find the time to write to me and tell me what kind of a gull that is. But I just want you to get some idea of what they look like sitting there facing the water. They are really, it's really wonderful to be out there watching these creatures live within their own in their own environment and doing what comes naturally. Unfortunately, the time is running out. I'm going to put a shadow underneath this fellow because otherwise he's just going to be there and suspended in midair without any logic to him at all. But for the most part, I'm hoping that the general feeling about this composition will interest people enough to go out and see if they can capture some of this themselves. I shouldn't be the only one that is out trying to, identify Long Island as what it is. The opportunities here are absolutely endless. If anybody wants to genuinely go out and record this place, they are at liberty to do so and use the technique that we've managed to discover here, namely the camcorder. I think that it is a valid, really a genuinely valid way of trying to learn how to do landscape painting. And nobody is going to be there to tell you you're making a mistake because you're working in your own environment and you can do as you jolly well please. Well, I hope that you got something out of this. It's always interesting to be able to tackle a problem and maybe see it come and bear some fruit, namely the interest that you might have in doing scenes of Long Island, which I'm sure that everybody enjoys as much as I do. Thanks for watching. This is Pat Windrow saying bye-bye until the next time.